Thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you for your testimony, panel. Mr. Knapp, CTIA has suggested that we need a national 5-year spectrum. From an investment standpoint, I can see the value of this policy since the testing and rollout of new capabilities is often a multi-year process. What are your thoughts on adopting a multi-year spectrum plan? This is for, again, Mr. Knapp.
Yeah, so there are a few things that are going on. One, from time to time, for example, we conducted an inquiry about spectrum above 24 gigahertz, spectrum in the lower bands, and so forth to identify. It does take time to roll them out. So that's what we've been doing, for example, in what we call the millimeter wave proceeding. So we're constantly, rather than a static process, constantly looking at what are the areas that are ripe for a look as well. And perhaps Mr. Clopen can also talk about the work that's going on the National Spectrum Strategy.
Please, if you'd like to.
Sure, happy to talk about the national. So this is, again, from the direction of the President. NTI is leading development of this strategy. A forward-looking, sustainable approach, better tools, better collaboration, and how we can do a better job of managing spectrum into the future. It's less of a band-specific, technology-specific approach we're looking at, but more, in getting away from that and how we can ultimately expand access in a larger perspective, rather than just that. Come up with approach for better solutions long term.
Okay, very good. One question for you, sir, again, Mr. Copeland, and you've touched on this, but there's an article on the front page of the Washington Times last week, actually, titled Savvy South Koreans Race to Embrace 5G Networks. Did you read that?
I believe I'm familiar with it, yes.
Okay. The article notes that South Korea already has tens of thousands of 5G-based is projecting to serve 90% of the population by the end of the year, while South Korea is significantly smaller than the U.S., obviously. This is a substantial deployment and consumer pickup rate of, again, 5G in such a short period of time. NTIA is required to release a report this month on the National Spectrum Strategy, as you alluded to. What do you recommend in your report to make more mid-band spectrum as we compete with South Korea and other countries in this race to get 5G?
So again, in the National Spectrum Strategy, we look at, particularly I think on the increased collaboration side, on how we can get parties together to act quicker. Because a lot of this is about timing. We've talked about spectrum roadmaps and making spectrum available. How do we do it quicker? How do we do it faster? In the 3450, 3550 megahertz discussion, which again is key mid-band spectrum, I talked before about internal NTI analysis going on the band. We've also reached out to industry stakeholders and invited them to come in and discuss with us a process on how we collaborate, not just as the government, but with industry as well. So get a better understanding on the license side, on 5G, on unlicensed, visions for how they might utilize the band, come up with an approach where we can get groups together, get engineers together from the government and industry, and more quickly and understand systems and work through that process. We did this in AWS-3, and that expedited things, and we're looking at similar things here. Again, each band, each analysis is going to be a little bit different, but those are the type of tools we're looking at. And then automating software too. So one of the big initiatives for NTIA is so much of our processes are more manual and slow, and we're trying to bring modernization, to bring better technology and artificial intelligence into the spectrum, update spectrum management tools to reflect the industry that we're trying to make spectrum available.
All right, very good. Mr. Knapp, the FCC has an open rulemaking to allow unlicensed devices in the 6 gigahertz band. This spectrum is currently used for mission-critical backhaul links for public safety, again, commercial carriers and utility companies. What steps can you take to prevent harmful interference to these important services? I don't have a lot of time, but if.
So I'll make it very quick.
Yeah, thank you.
So for the outdoor deployments, we would use an automated frequency coordination system to stay out of the way of those point-to-point links and not interfere with them. This is still an open proceeding, so that's what we had proposed. For the indoor use, there's a debate about whether they need to be part of that or not. And at certain power levels, whether there's so little risk that we don't need to tie them into a separate mechanism.
Very good.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Matsui for 5 minutes.